Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I want these kids off my damn lawn. Feeling old as shit tonight.
Yeah, you are Pat Garrett tonight. You are the old man Pat Garrett. when you get old, you just have to go by Pat. Like they just reduce it down.
Yeah. They turn you into Pat Garrett.
Yes, tonight, Patrick, we're reviewing a new film called Hell of a Summer, which is as I mentioned, a horror comedy slasher teen comedy, but it's made very special because the two filmmakers, granted, in reality, one is 25, one is 22, but they're very young in terms of like actual filmmakers. And so this gives us a slightly different perspective on a teen slasher comedy.
Oh my God. We're talking Hell of a Summer tonight, made by two people born after the 2000s. Like, written and directed, right? So I'm gonna name off pretty much the whole cast because they play a pretty important role. This stars Daniel Gravel as Ari, Julia Lalonde as Noelle, Kristen Nazaire as Shannon, Julia Doyle as Miley, Matthew Finlan as Ezra, Pardee Saremi as Demi, Abby Quinn as Claire, Billy Brick as Bobby, DeFarrowoon Etai as Mike, Finn Wolfhard as Chris, and Fred Hetchinger as Jason. And as you mentioned, Damon, written and directed by the very young Billy Brick and Finn Wolfhard. And if Finn Wolfhard sounds familiar and looks familiar, that's because Finn has grown up before our very eyes, Damon, one of the stars of one of the bigger television shows of the last 10 years, Stranger Things, which we've actually covered on this podcast.
Yes, Finn Wolfhard is very familiar, and I'm not turning this into a competition. Certainly don't mean it that way. But when you look at a young ensemble like Stranger Things, you look at who breaks out from that show. I mean, of course, Winona Ryder was already famous, so we're not counting her. David Harbour, of course, has become a household name. I think he's probably been, one of the biggest stars to come from that show. And I know people immediately point to Millie Bobby Brown, and Netflix has certainly funded her to a whole lot of movies. But I would argue that Finn Wolfhard has actually had the biggest career outside of that in terms of commercially and critically successful material. Like, I'm not trying to knock down Millie Bobby Brown, but a lot of her films haven't exactly received the nicest of reviews. I guess that's the kindest way to say it. Whereas Finn Wolfhard, Ghostbusters Afterlife. I know Ghostbusters Frozen Empire wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. And other things he starred in, and now he's actually writing and directing his own movies. This kid is just talented. It just pisses me off, man. At 22, this kid's just out there creating and killing it.
But that's what it is, really. I mean, it's something I think we haven't noticed, but it's like, yeah, Steven Spielberg was out there kicking ass at like 27. Like, it happens. They're out there. And now we're seeing a whole new group of kids who were literally born when Damon and I were at the movies with our girlfriends driving cars and drinking beer. Like, quite literally when they were born. Like, you're just like, oh, these whippersnappers are making movies. And this isn't the first time this has happened on our podcast. Certainly with this age, it has. But the Philippou brothers are young millennials. And they made a young millennial movie called Talk to Me that you and I loved. How much did we love it? It was both our number one film of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And by the way, their new movie, Bring Her Back, looks very good. I can't wait to watch it. But what was interesting about talking about Talk to Me was that we finally got the perspective of a horror film from millennials, made and written by millennials, essentially for millennials, and everybody else that wanted to jump on the train could enjoy it. It was a great movie, and you saw their perspective in a horror movie. Hell of a Summer gives us a chance for the very next generation after that, Gen Z, to tell their horror stories. And I was like, well, what's that going to look like? Like, what on earth is it going to look like to see Gen Zs talk horror? And I was very surprised, Damon. Do you want to get into not the spoiler aspect of it, but just the surprise of, like, tonally what a Gen Z horror looks like?
So people probably get sick of hearing me say this, that I'm a writer. Yes, I'm a writer, but I love reading great writing. I love reading great scripts and great books and things like that. And I'm always impressed when I hear the certain voice of an author in a story or a book or a script that I'm reading. And because I'll be the first to admit, I do turn into a little bit, not necessarily about this subject, but it reminds me of Seinfeld when George and Jerry are writing a pilot and they're like, what would Elaine say here? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, if I knew what women thought, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in. And so they literally write her out of the script because they're like, we have no idea how to write for a woman. I think there's a lot of these teen younger films that are written by older writers where we've talked about on this show where we're just like, that doesn't sound authentic. Like no 20 something would say that or do that or act like that. And I'll be the first to admit, like, when I was 20, it was a different era. It was a different world. Just like people who grew up in the 80s or grew up in the 90s or grew up in the 2000s, everyone's going to have a slightly different experience at that age. So what I loved about this film, even though I'm clearly older than Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick, is the authenticity that they kept in this film. It felt authentically Gen Z. Now, there's going to be people who are put off by that because they are being like, these young whippersnappers, get off my lawn.
Exactly.
But for me, it felt truly authentic because I have watched so many movies where you're watching the writing, you're watching the direction, you're watching the dialogue. You're like, no 20-year-old thinks that way. Even me being way older than 20, even I know a 20-year-old doesn't think that way.
Right.
And so I appreciate the authenticity that Finn and Billy brought to a script like this. It reminds me, I guess the best analogy I could use is when I first saw Clerks years ago, right. Kevin Smith's Clerks, I worked in a retail store. And I was like, that is so damn perfect to what it's like to work in retail at that age. I was a 20-something working retail, and I was like, Kevin Smith nailed it. Of course, it's exaggerated, but the idea of customers and the interactions, and it was perfect. I was like, oh my God, did he just see into my life? And that's kind of what this movie feels like.
We just talked about a movie that dipped right into our lives, and that was Y2K. And you and I probably loved it more than a lot of other people because it literally spoke to our high school experience. It literally spoke to those few years that floated between graduating high school and being just outside of high school. And we soaked it up because it was like, oh my God, Kyle Mooney is literally speaking our language. It's literally what it was like to be that age. We are seeing like a snapshot of it. It was vastly entertaining. But yeah, this is the first time that a bunch of old farts aren't trying to write youngsters. And we have talked about multiple movies on this podcast where it was clear that the people were a little too old to be writing young people. They didn't know how to do it. They didn't get it. They were certainly past their time. And what they could have used really was just some insight from some young people to be like, hey, how do we turn this language around, turn these kids around to make them feel authentic in this movie? You don't have to worry about that with a movie like Hell of a Summer. It's literally written by a couple of 23-year-olds. And so you're getting their perspective on what it's like to just be them right then and there. I was not prepared, and this is without any spoilers. Even the teaser that I watched, or if you watch the full trailer, you get an idea that this is a comedy. I did not realize this was going to be a full-blown, full-throated comedy, very heavy on the comedy. There is, of course, a horror element. This is 100% a camp slasher, but the emphasis is on the jokes. The emphasis is on the hilarity. Now, you and I actually just talked about comedy because we were talking about Death of a Unicorn, which is, it positions itself as a comedy, and we didn't find it terribly funny. Like, it was funny in moments. I think, I don't know how these kids did it. They're incredibly talented. They were very funny. They were very relevant to who they are because they're literally writing their own generation. And they spoke to me. And they spoke to slasher fans because Finn and Billy, they consider themselves slasher fans, and certainly in this setting of like a camp with a masked killer coming after you, you're like, but are they going to get it, or are they going to make fun of slashers? They don't bother making fun of slashers. They make a slasher set in their world, set with their rules, their rule sets, their language, everything. It's like getting Clerks Like if you got a Clerks horror film back in whatever it was, 94, you get that classic Gen X slasher. You're getting a classic Gen Z slasher right here. It was funny. I was in the theater, and I was there with my brother Schwenk, who's a little bit younger than me. So he's not even Gen Z. He's still millennial. But afterwards, there were some young people, and we were all around taking a survey for the theater because I like to contribute to the theater experience, and if taking surveys helps them, I'll do that. And these younger people were there, and they were talking about the movie while they were doing the survey. And they go, "We didn't even know this was a horror movie. We just saw Finn Wolfhard was in it, and we wanted to see it. We had no idea what we were getting into." That's going to be exciting for like that whole generation who's just like, I just want to see Finn Wolfhard and stuff because I know I grew up with him on Stranger Things. And they said that they were scared out of their minds because they didn't know they were getting into a horror movie. I thought it was hilarious. Here I am, the old goat that watches like like martyrs for fun. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, it doesn't. Throw whatever you want to throw at me. I'll be fine. But I do wonder what this is going to do. I kind of hope this movie does well because this is now a generational horror. I just wasn't ready, Damon, for like it to be a full blown, almost slapstick comedy.
So you mentioned Death of a Unicorn, and again, we always say this, that comedy, much like anything else, even horror for that matter, is subjective. What we find funny or don't find funny isn't necessarily what somebody else finds funny or not finds funny. But I will say, unlike Death of a Unicorn, which I found mostly unfunny outside of a few key moments and a few key lines, this movie actually made me laugh. This movie actually made me enjoy the comedy a lot more. And again, I think a lot of it goes to the way that the characters speak to each other, the way they act towards each other. They feel like teenagers, real teenagers in a horror film. And I know I've said this on the show before. It's well documented. I am a massive slasher fan. That is my favorite genre of horror film. But weirdly, I also find myself being a little weirdly judgmental towards slasher films because some people are just like, give me a slasher. It can be good, it can be bad. It's like pizza. It's all good, Like even the worst pizza is still good pizza.
Right.
I'm not quite there like that. I do like a lot of good pizza, but give me a New York slice, give me a Chicago deep dish. Like I still have some good pizza. I'll eat all kinds of pizza, but clearly I eat a lot of pizza. But give me good pizza. It's got to be good pizza, and that's kind of where I am with slashers. Where like I'm all for a slasher, but it's still gotta give me something I can bite into, I can get into. And this film did that. It was funny, but it was also just tinged enough with the horror. As you said, it's much more comedy than horror, but the horror elements do keep it relevant to that genre. I'm reminded of a TV show that came out a few years ago, actually starring Glenn Powell, who is now like one of the biggest movie stars on earth. A show called Scream Queens. It was written by Ryan. Why am I forgetting his name? American Horror Story. Ryan.
Ryan Murphy.
Ryan Murphy.
Yeah.
Ryan Murphy. Scream Queens. It starred Emma Roberts and Glenn Powell, and it had like a pretty all-star cast. You go back. The first season of that show was so much fun. It was definitely more comedy than it was horror, but they injected just enough horror elements. You'd be in this really like dorky, funny sorority fraternity comedy, and then out of nowhere, this killer would come out and mow over somebody with a freaking lawnmower and kill them and brutally butcher them with like a lawnmower. And this was shown on Fox, so of course the graphic nature of it all wasn't that bad, the gory, but still. So you'd inject just like that little bit of horror that's like, oh wow, I'm still watching a horror show. It's funny. It's meant to be funny. It's meant to be these kind of vapid teens or these vapid 20-somethings in college. But you inject a little bit of horror and it still works. And then the show got goofy in the second season. That's neither here nor there. But that first season was a perfect microcosm of like a really funny show that had just perfect elements of horror. That's what Hell of a Summer is. It's a funny movie. And it works comedically, but there's just enough horror. It's just enough stabbing to make it work.
I think what I appreciate the big this is so interesting. This is such like an anthropological study almost. is that I think of like Gen Xers and elder millennials, they're a bit obsessed with self-aware humor, and I think it comes from growing up on Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino, where it's like the dialogue in those movies is so far removed from the world, like it is almost farcical, right? So like they, and I know you like a self-aware humor too for the most part, but it's like they want to like basically do a stand-up bit for the camera, and that doesn't work for me personally. It's like I'm from that generation, so it should work for me. It doesn't. I prefer comedy where the characters don't know they're being funny, which is I think it comes from kind of an older style. I was surprised to see that that is very much what Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick did here. Their characters don't know they're being funny. They are not playing to the camera. I mean, some people might think they are, but I'm like, no, they're really playing to who they are generationally. And what I found is that the way they see themselves is they are so absolutely neurotic as a generation that when they are faced with this, really ridiculous scenario of being hunted down in a summer camp, they're so neurotic that they don't care that they're being chased down by a killer. They're too wrapped up in their own minds to give two shits about it. I mean, they kind of do, kind of, but their own neuroses gets in the way of it, which is a very like Woody Allen thing to do. Again, that's like two generations back. That's not even boomers. That's like pre-boomers, where you're like, I'm too neurotic to even grasp what's going on here. And then they couple that with this idea of being so affected as kids that were raised in a post 9/11 world that they think, based on all the input they get every single day with social media and all the crazy shit that you can see on the internet and the way social media changes your brain, they're also bold enough to believe that they can crack the case. It's so three generations back. It's so weird to me. It's like this would have made a perfectly great screwball comedy of the 1960s, early 1970s. It's so weird how that lays itself out, because they're just like, yeah, of course we'll take this on. Whereas like Gen Xers would be like, fuck it, I'm gonna fight these guys. That's all the like 2000s, like the 96. That's when we got Sidney Prescott. Written by Gen Xers, old Gen Xers who said, fuck it, if a slasher's coming for me, I'm going to fucking fight that fool from day one. And that's what they did. And that was like, that went from 96 to into the 2000s, which was like, oh, you got a chainsaw? Bro, I got a baseball bat. Let's fight. It's a very Gen X thing to do. This was this very interesting Gen Z approach to it, where it was like, you're going to slash us? Okay, but first I need to take my allergy medication. And first I need, we'll get to it. We'll do it. But I need to do all these other things first that have nothing to do with being in a slasher. I thought it was so interesting. You just don't see that in millennial and Gen X horror, and especially boomer horror. Like all those things are very different. Boomer horror was like the stuff you and I grew up on, the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and the Hellraisers. Very sexual, very, very, very heavy, and women were just, they were fodder, like that's how we learned about the final girl. She was just crazy enough to survive, just hot enough to survive. Like that was kind of the ethos of all that. And so to see a new generation go, this is how we take on horror, I was like, holy shit. I was very surprised by that.
I want to give two examples from this movie to fit into what you say, and neither one of them really spoil anything for this movie. But one, let me just go ahead and say, fuck Woody Allen. I can't stand Woody Allen.
Yeah, no shit. But they're neurotic like Woody Allen. Like that was my point, is they're very neurotic.
Yeah, these pretzels are making me thirsty. There's two examples. One, in this movie, Finn Wolfhard's character, Chris, shows up, and there's a girl he's crushing on in this show, or in this movie, excuse me. And to give an example of what you're talking about, they're in the middle of like being chased by a killer, not literally being chased. I mean, they're just, right. They know there's a killer in camp. And in the back of Finn Wolfhard's character's mind, he's like, I need to save my girl. But then at the exact same time, he's voicing this to his friend. Do you think she actually likes me? And just that little injection of that attitude you're talking about. Like they're literally running. So the horror element is him. I gotta save my girl. And the other side is like, but does she really like me? And there's another example of this. Billy Brick's character. At some point, somebody makes an observation, and by the way, again, this is not. I mean, we could really go full spoilers, and you're really not going to ruin this movie. I promise.
Yeah, it's a camp slasher. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, somebody makes the observation that the killer is knocking off the hottest people first, which I thought was hilarious. And the rest of the movie is Billy Brick's character being so offended that he didn't get murdered because he's like, "Am I not hot enough?" And it's the funniest shit because it feels genuine to that character. And yes, he's being chased by a murderer. And yes, he has to defend himself. And yes, he is literally running for his life. But somewhere embedded in the back of his head was I just not hot enough to kill first? And I love that little detail, that little funny detail that works so well.
Yeah, and I think a great element of any good slasher to actually stay on the topic of horror is like you have to develop up who these characters are. In the 80s, they did it way simpler. He's the jock. He's the asshole. He's the nerd. She's the bookworm. She's the bad girl. They keep it so like surface level. I was impressed with, I think, not only did they do that in this movie, there's like, for instance, there's the vegan. She's the vegan. Like if I just say, oh, the vegan girl, you already know the stereotypes and they play them, which I was surprised. I was like, oh, they didn't nuance that at all. Like as Gen Zers, they were like, yeah, we think this vegan girl's annoying and here's why. And they give you like their version of what they think an annoying vegan girl is. But then they have like a guy who's kind of jocular, but he's Gen Z jocular. So he bullshits about like fighting cops and all that stuff. So I don't want to give too much away, but my point is that they build up their characters in a way that's a little bit more developed than you would do in an 80s slasher, but is still very much in line with the idea of just like, here's the archetypes. We're going to put archetypes out here. We're just better at painting them than you used to be. We've gotten to be better storytellers than you were. You were out to just make a buck and get some people nude on camera and bloody them up, and that was going to make you money on the box office weekend. We do it with a little more nuance than you would, but the principle was the same. Build up these characters and kill them based on their personality traits. Like that's still the formula. Clearly Finn and Billy saw that in the formula of camp slashers, which they claim to love so much. Clearly they studied that and said, yeah, we have like, who's the tough guy? Who's the pretty boy? Who's the smart girl? Like they figured it all out, but they did it very Gen Z. They did it very much in their own voice.
And also, the character development in this movie is fully fleshed out, which I was actually a little surprised by. I didn't expect that. Not to say that Finn and Billy aren't talented. It's just the nature of a camp slasher. You're just not meant to seriously care about the characters. They are just cannon fodder. They're all red shirts from Star Trek. You're just waiting to see which one or two of them make it out alive. That's not the case here. They fully flesh out pretty much you understand the machinations of every single character in this film. And it's an ensemble cast. There's like 8 to 10 kids. It's kind of shocking how well they flesh out all the characters. I was blown away by that. I was curious, I would be curious to talk to them and know when they wrote the script, was that always the intention of really, really digging into these characters and really understanding? You mentioned the vegan girl. You totally understand that character when you meet her. There's a kid there who's like, there's a girl there who's kind of the alternative, kind of goth girl. Oh, the
goth girl, yeah.
You understand her right away. And then even Chris and it's Finn Wolfhard's character, Chris and Bobby, which are, Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick's characters. Chris and Bobby are best friends. They don't necessarily fit into the archetype of like a square peg, like that's the athlete, it's the Breakfast Club, the jock, the nerd, they don't fit in that box. But they're best friends, and the dynamic between them is the character development. throughout this movie, the way they interact with each other. I was shocked. I've seen so many movies with ensemble casts where the character development is dreadful. And I don't want to name names. We can go back to the history of this podcast and talk about so many movies where character development just ruins the movie because there's none. You feel like you don't know, much less care about these characters. Every single person in this movie, you understand who they are, what their motivation is, and they're not hammering you over the head either. This isn't like a character study. It's just enough character development to where you understand what drives them.
It's efficient character development because this is a movie that's a breezy 88 minutes. I will say, I was getting a little worried because I started to clock the movie, and you know what happens when Patrick Garris starts clocking a movie. He's saying, are you going to get to this shit already? What they're doing, I mean, and they do, by the way, they do the classic thing. There's a cold open murder. We won't talk about that yet, but there's a cold open kill, and then they kind of get into establishing the characters. And I was like, you guys are really taking a long time establishing these characters. They take the time to get to everybody, but they do pay that off in the second half of the movie. But it takes about 45 minutes to get through all of that with the cold open, with establishing who the characters are. Because, of course, as you can tell from the trailer, the character of Jason, played by Fred Hetchinger, he's this kid who just can't seem to grow up and let go of the camp. He's 24 years old, and he just loves camp way more than everybody else. These are all very sort of jaded 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who are like, camp is stupid. And he's like, camp is great. Doesn't everybody else love camp? That's who he is. And so it took a while to get all that off the ground. And I was starting to go like, where are we really going with this? Then very smartly, and this is a spoiler thing, and I'm assuming we're going to get into spoilers here very shortly, but they do something which I asked Death of a Unicorn to do, which is get to that thing at like the middle of the second act. Get to that thing that turns the whole movie right at about that basically the halfway point of the movie. At the halfway point of the movie, find a way to make the audience go, oh, well, wait a minute. That's a new complication on top of what is already being complicated here. Hell of a Summer does that. At almost the halfway mark, we're going to talk right about in just a moment here. They do something that makes you go, well, wait a minute. Okay. And then so you're now in a whole new position for the rest of the movie, and you have to battle your way out of that. Death of a Unicorn tried to do it like almost midway through the end of the third act. I mean, midway through the third act, meaning like the movie's almost over. I mean, you're like 10, 15 minutes from the movie being over, and they're like, hey, okay, how about we do this now? And you're like, a little late for that, pal. You do it at that midway point, and it gives you time to unravel everything we just established, everything that we just set up. It gives you time to unfurl all of it. I'm really impressed with these two, with Wolfhard and Brick, because I mean, it's kind of high level shit. Like, it's stuff I expect from like Beck and Woods, the guys who did like Heretic and The Quiet Place and all that stuff. It's like smart writing. And it some might even accuse it of like writing by numbers, where it's like, yeah, at about the halfway point of the movie, you need to recomplicate the movie. Well, it fucking works. Formula or not, it works, and it makes for a more entertaining movie. If they tried to unravel this, if they gave you the big twist near the end of this movie, I would have had problems with this movie if the twist came where it typically comes in, like, say, a Scream movie, which is right near the start of the third act or just afterwards. It came at a point in the movie where we could properly unravel it and make it make sense.
Last thing before we get to spoilers, I originally was going to bring up not really a category, more of a conversation, because for those who maybe don't listen to every single episode of this podcast or don't know, Patrick is a massive Friday the 13th fan. That is your favorite horror franchise. And out of how many films are there in the franchise at this point? Is it 11, 10, 11?
Something like 11 or 12, like, yeah.
7 or 8 of them take place at a camp, right? That's pretty standard. That's where it all started. Yeah. So you are the summer camp slasher expert, but there are other movies set at summer camps. The Burning is a great example of that. Part 2 of the Fear Street trilogy. This is a very favorite trope of horror films. And I was originally going to have a conversation of like, what do you need to make a great summer camp slasher film? I'm not doing that now because I think what Hell of a Summer did was stick to some of the rules, break a few more, and create a few others. And this is truly a Gen Z summer camp slasher. I can't really compare it to Friday the 13th because those characters, like, I don't even remember the characters' names outside of Alice. I don't remember anybody from that. I know Kevin Bacon was in it. Don't remember Kevin Bacon's character's name.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon. And so, like, when I thought my original idea was like, let's talk about what makes a great, I thought it was going to fall into those categories. It does to a certain extent, of course, but a lot of the tropes that were so recognizable in Sleepaway Camp, in Friday the 13th, in The Burning, they don't really happen here. Like, I was like, do you got to have horned up teens? They are horned up. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely horned up teens in this movie, but it's not to the extent of what they did back in the 80s. And I was super impressed by that element of it. And it kind of turned the camp slasher on its head a little bit, even though it hit all those notes. One last thing I want to throw to you, Patrick. You are a parent?
Mm-hmm.
Do they still have summer camps? Like, I'm like, when I was growing up, I remember there being like, we had like football camps, and it was like a week, or I don't even remember that we actually stayed anywhere. We just like had a week of like a camp of like doing football or doing a sport. I don't remember. Maybe I'm just like not like. Are there still summer camps? Am I just oblivious to this? Like, do they actually still exist? Because it feels of an era.
They still exist. They do. And I almost honestly, it kind of even feels like maybe a Wolfhard and Brick went to summer camps. Like, they seem to have a handle on what it's like, and we'll get into it in spoilers. But they kind of like. They shoo aside a lot of that because they're focusing on something specific, so they don't really get into that. But I will address this, Damon. What you're talking about there with the summer camp slasher. We've got a lot of them. What have we done on this show so many times when we've talked about classic slashers? We go, boy, somebody could really improve on these. Like, they're kind of dated. We enjoy them, and I think a lot of different generations do. Like, multi-generations go, man, I really love the Friday the 13th movies, even though they're not great movies. You wouldn't call them good movies, but you just love them. They fill they fulfill a need, and I think what they did with Hell of a Summer is they did improve on a standard camp slasher. They went, yeah, we can make it better. I take some umbrage also with there's some cons, if you will. There's some Giving Part 5 that we'll talk about, but that's more spoilery. But for the most part, it was like, yeah, they just made the camp slasher, which sometimes was funny unintentionally, funny on purpose, funny with a purpose, and better. They give you characters that you root for, that you want to see dead, which is some of the standard rules. But they do it with some nuance. They do it with some more sophistication. I have asked multiple times on this show for writers and producers to respect the audiences of today. They are more sophisticated than they've ever been, and our training as cinephiles and TV junkies, we have gotten more sophisticated, and our audience is more sophisticated than it's ever been. Don't pull some dumb shit on us. They didn't. They were smart about how they approached this movie.
Well, and last thing I'll say before we get to spoilers, I think that we talk about the evolution of certain forms of horror. Scream coming out in 96 completely changed the slasher genre in and of itself. It became, self-affecting horror in that way. They were self-deprecating horror in those movies and self-aware horror in those movies. Yeah. And it totally changed the entire horror genre, not just slashers, just horror in general. And now, like, when you get to Scream 6 or whatever, when they're talking about, like, elevated horror, which I hate that term. It's just horror. Yeah. But you do see, like, there are more, you could say more sophisticated horror films. I'm not saying there aren't those. You look at what Jordan Peele does in Get Out, or you think about Heretic or movies, of that ilk. But I appreciate that they are giving you something slightly different, slightly improved, slightly better in a way, because I think that's been the hardest evolution for some horror genres, is finding that next step, finding that future evolution. And I'm not saying that Hell of a Summer is Scream all over again, where this is going to
Right.
completely change things. But specifically to the summer camp slasher, which I'll be honest, it's not really a genre that I've loved. I mean, I enjoy Friday the 13th, and Sleepaway Camp is what it is. I've enjoyed a couple of those movies, and The Burning is fine. Like, I enjoyed that a lot for what it was, coming out in 1981 or whatever, 82. But this was one that, because it had a different vibe and a different approach and different character development, all those kind of things, I enjoyed it more. And as a slasher fan, even I have genres of slashers, and I almost feel like the camp slasher is so generic that it's just like, man, I almost went into this one like, here we go, we're gonna hit some beats here, and it's gonna feel like, I was like, if this is even close to what it should be, Patrick's gonna love it, and I'm gonna come and be like, it was all right. I don't get that feeling at all. I really enjoyed this movie, and it seems like you really enjoyed it too, because it doesn't just fall into those categories. Patrick, I think we got to get into spoilers now.
Let's do it.
So if you haven't seen Hell of a Summer, it is available right now in theaters. I know we champion the theater experience constantly. Go see it though. If you like a slasher, you like a good old fashioned but also new school slasher, go see this in theaters. It was fun. My theater was pretty full. I was pretty impressed with how many people were there on opening night in my theater, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it. So go see it right now. Patrick, I'll turn the table to you to talk as we get into spoilers for Hell of a Summer.
Yes, Damon. So as we mentioned, this kid in Arrested Development, a 24-year-old Jason, he just loves being at the camp. I wonder why they called him Jason. Nice little nod there, obviously. He loves this, but this movie starts basically I think almost a week before the kids are going to come to camp. And it's just the camp counselors. So it's Jason and all these people I listed at the beginning of the movie. All these camp counselors really can't give a shit. It's almost a wonder, why are they even fucking there? Like, they really don't care. But I think what it is they like the camaraderie. Ultimately, they like hanging out with each other. Some of them have crushes, all that stuff, all the classic camp counselor stuff. And then the murders start happening. Or do they? Because in that 45-minute run-up, I got a little frustrated because I was like, a lot of these kills are happening off camera. Or like kind of off camera, kind of implied. And I was like, what is going on exactly? Like, why are we not seeing these kills? Where there's a good reason for that. Jason finds one of the camp counselors, who goes by the name of Demi. She's sort of like an influencer, kind of, mean girl. Like, if you wanted to get her vibe, that's who she is. He finds her dead in her bed, and he freaks out. He runs and goes to tell everybody, and he's like Demi's dead, everybody go, like, he's freaking out. They go back to her room, she's not there. Oh, what's going on? Like, that doesn't make sense. Where did Mike go? Mike was kind of flirting with her and all that stuff. So he's like, I think this killer got them. Like, I'm freaked out. Like, this is crazy. And then a couple more kids disappear, and I'm like, why are they disappearing? What's going on? Well, Damon, it turns out that Demi, you never see her get killed. Mike, you never see her get killed. That's for good reason. There are two killers in this camp. They're Demi and Mike. Then you go, wait, that sounds an awful lot like Scream. What does Scream do, Damon? You could fill in the blank for me right here. Somewhere near the end, the mask comes off, a la Scooby-Doo. Now let's find out who the killer really is. And then it's usually somebody's cousin's friend's brother's sister, uncle on the internet. It's always some weird convoluted thing. This movie turns out that Demi and Mike is basically just wagging his tongue for Demi. He loves her, and he just wants to do whatever she wants to do. And she wants to be a famous killer. Again, very Scream. You're like, this is some Scream shit. Well, Finn and Billy probably grew up on Scream, so it makes sense that they use Scream as a template. And I was like, oh man, like I'm not really into this, but they did it at the midpoint of the movie. So now at the midpoint, imagine at Scream, you kind of have to wait to the end and learn who it is, and then there's a final sequence, and then they get killed by Sydney or someone else. They do it at the middle of the movie where I learned this. I didn't love that motivation. Like she just wanted to be famous. Mike convinces her, however, he's like, look, I really don't want to go to jail though. Like I kind of want to just like be with you. So instead of us being famous killers, what if we just blame it on Jason? Because the rest of the camp kind of thinks it's him because there's no proof of these dead bodies. There's just Jason saying there's dead bodies and there's blood. So they're over there thinking that Jason's the killer. And Mike goes, let's just lean into that. Let's lean into that and be the people who survived the camp killer. And then we'll be famous for surviving. And she goes, that's actually a good idea. We'll do that instead. Then I don't have to go to jail. So then the movie becomes about that. And I liked that twist.
And you got to remember, when they say that we're going to be the final survivors, they still got to knock off people.
They still got to kill everybody.
Yes. They want to be the only two survivors. We don't want to share the spotlight. I'm just going to say it right here, I fucking loved the simplicity of the motivation and the pivot to the new motivation. Because yes, you're right. Like we want to be famous killers. Yes, that sounds very familiar and it should. But the fact that, and again, the way they present it with Demi being she's basically like a beauty influencer. She's like, I'm going to show you guys how to, do the makeup or whatever. This is like the very beginning of the movie. And Mike is the jocular, I roundhouse kicked a cop. He keeps trying to tell this story throughout the movie, how he roundhouse kicked a cop. And it's just like, dude, you didn't roundhouse kick shit. And you know it, but he's telling this story and everyone's hanging on his every word because he's like the big jocular kind of, the workout guy. And so when they say we want to be famous as killers, the way they say it is different than, let's say, Billy and Stu and Scream. They're saying it in a very TikTok way. Like, we want to be famous on TikTok. Not necessarily we want infamy. We just want to be famous on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. You get that sense from them. They want to be killer influencers. And then the pivot to basically Emma Roberts' motivation in Scream 4, where she says, she grew up with Sidney Prescott as her cousin, and she's like, I want to be Sidney. I want to be the final girl. I want to live in that world. And so she just takes it upon herself to say, I'm going to kill everybody else, and I'm the last survivor, and now people are going to love me. I'm going to get the book deal. I'm going to become this. I'm going to become that. I'm going to become famous doing it that way. The fact that they pivot midway through the movie, yet keep the horror, which is still have to kill everybody, because we can't share this with anybody else. We have to kill everybody else, so we're the only two people left. I fucking loved it.
It was a fun way to kind of, because that's why it's so disappointing when it happens in a Scream movie, because it's at the end. You just have to accept everything that came forward, and they just have to explain it away at the end. They explain it to you at the midpoint. They basically give you a new rule set, a new goal, and new obstacles right then and there. It's like, oh, okay, we have a new goal. The new goal is we don't want to be famous killers. We just want to be famous. Great. Okay, so how do we pawn this off so we don't go to jail? Oh, great. We'll pin it on Jason. They already think he's the killer. Great. So our new goal is to just kill everybody off and we'll be the two survivors. Great. And now us as the audience with our superior position, we know what their motivations are. So when we cut back to Jason and the rest of the counselors, we're like, motherfucker, move here, get out of there. Stop believing it's Jason. Because everybody's still very much like, it's got to be Jason. The only person who believes that it's not Jason is Claire. And Claire, you could tell that Claire and Jason kind of have, they're kind of into each other, but they're both awkward nerds and they don't really know how to be that way. So you're kind of hoping that at some point in the movie they'll get together. But she's the only person that's like, I know Jason didn't kill him. I don't know. He doesn't have that ability. They also low key insult him. They just go, yeah, we just didn't think. No one thinks you can overpower anybody. So nobody really thinks you're the killer. That no one would believe it. And so there's the two competing goals and the two competing obstacles. That's smart that's again, it sounds very by the book, by the numbers screenwriting. If you're somebody who studies screenwriting, but that fucking works. You know who tells you goals and obstacles? Aaron Sorkin, multi-award winning, prolific writer, will tell you your movie needs goals and obstacles. That's exactly what they did here. And they smartly, they gave the killers goals and obstacles, and they gave the protagonists goals and obstacles. That's sophistication for the camp slasher genre. Damon, I'm always going to beat the drum for Friday the 13th. Jason's goal is revenge for his mother. The obstacle is teens are stupid, right? And or there's always one final girl that's going to get in the way. That's really all his obstacle is. It's just not terribly nuanced. Their goal, the killer's goal, is more nuanced, because they're like, oh yeah, we're dumb kids. We should have thought about that. We should have been the survivors, not the killers. That's smart. We'll have to do that. The obstacle is they've got to get around the people that are slightly smarter than them, which is just a couple of nerdy camp counselors. And then on the flip side, you have the protagonists, and they have their obstacles and their goals, because their goal is to survive and to reveal who the killers are. But the obstacle is all the rest of the counselors think Jason's the killer. And he's like, come on, guys, I'm a fucking dork. There's no way I'm not killing anybody. So, and then you mix in all the comedy. And the comedy, which they, again, another very smart thing that they did in this movie, the comedy of this movie moves the plot along. They don't stop to be funny. That's a late stage Gen X and a millennial thing, which is, let's stop the movie to be funny. They don't stop the movie to be funny. Everything that's happening is moving the plot along, and they're just being funny to move the plot along. It's fucking great. And it reveals character and all this stuff. This is one of the better scripts of the year. I don't know that it's going to make my top 10 necessarily, but in terms of script execution, I would love to sit down and break this thing down with them, because I think they really fucking nailed something here.
And I can enjoy a good fantasy storytelling in a horror film, but I also adored the relationships that they built throughout this film. Not only, I'm not talking just girlfriend, boyfriend, I'm talking about just friendships, because, and I'm saying this is a movie that I love. I absolutely love The Faculty. Whatever it was, 1999, 2000's Faculty, written by Kevin Williamson, directed by Robert Rodriguez. I adore that movie. But there's one little thing that always kind of bugged me about that movie, was the ending where the nerdy, geeky kid gets the hot cheerleader, he ends up with, like, it would be like in Breakfast Club if Anthony Michael Hall's character ends up with Molly Ringwald. No, that's not realistic. It's going to be Judd Nelson. Of course, she's going to end up with Judd Nelson. And I've always been a little, like, wary, like, as a nerdy kid and as an alternative kid growing up, does it happen occasionally? Yes, you occasionally get, Eddie from Stranger Things, and he gets to flirt with the hot cheerleader, but he doesn't actually get with her in Stranger Things. Everyone thinks he killed her. But they had that flirtation. Everyone's like, hold on now, this isn't right. Eddie shouldn't be getting with the hot cheerleader. That's reality. The reality is the metal dude doesn't generally end up with the hot cheerleader. This movie actually works really well with that, because there's a version of this camp slasher, whatever, where Jason, being the nerdy 24-year-old, 8-year veteran of this camp, who everyone is like, you're back? Why are you back? They all kind of make fun of him, because they're like, we're like 19, 20. This is totally just a summer job for us. Clearly, this is your dream come true. Like, he makes his own position as camp leader. They're like, that's not a real thing. He's like, well, I'm making it a real. He loves this place, and they all kind of mock him for it. There's a world where they're like, we're going to get him with, I know Demi is the killer in this one, but she's like the hot influencer or whatever. Like, there's a version of this where he gets with her because
he's got a crush on her, and he was ignoring Claire. Like, that's the old way.
Yeah, she by the end of the movie, she sees something in Jason that she never saw before, and they get together. And again, I enjoy a good fantasy storytelling as much as anybody is the nerdy guy who never ended up with the hot cheerleader, and that's fine. But Jason and Claire are kind of like a little bit of the dorky outcasts, and they fit. They fit together. And again, even in the fact they fit together, they don't just get together. They're so
No.
awkward and dorky that they can't quite express that emotion towards each other. And it takes them literally to the very end of the movie for them to finally connect in that way. Everyone's character makes sense in why they are together. There's so many movies where we're like, why was that guy friends with them? Like, why would you be a friend? They don't even look like they like each other. Everyone in this movie, like not everyone likes each other in this movie. You can clearly tell that in a lot of the relationships. And even with Chris and Bobby, who are best friends, Bobby is jealous because Chris is getting a girlfriend at camp. He hooks up with this girl, Shannon. And immediately you see that dynamic where Bobby's like jealous that someone is getting Chris's attention besides him. It all makes sense. It all fits. It's all shockingly well done to where you're not like, A, I hate these people because we've had so many movies where we're like, God, we just didn't like these characters. And B, we're just like, why were they together? Why are you trying to shoehorn us in to believe that they were friends? These characters all work. And there are some you're not going to like. There's some you are going to like. But it all makes sense why you like or dislike them.
Can we get into categories? Because I'm realizing I'm gonna make an audible based on this character work, and we might as well I think we're in this kind of character flow right now that we might as well talk best performance and MVPs, because I'm realizing who my MVP is, and it's because of what you're just saying right now, which is no matter how much you might, if you're in the wrong mood when you sit down for this movie, you might be like, when will they get to the fucking point? Everybody matters in this movie. And so that you saying that made me realize I need to call an audible on one of my categories, because the character of Bobby is very important to this movie, even though he often feels like he's not. So I if you're ready, Damon, let's get into some categories.
Well, let's get into best performance and kick things off right there. And I'm just going to spoil it and say we have the same best performance. So let's just talk about it. Patrick, I'll give you the floor. Best performance in Hell of a Summer.
My best performance goes to our lead, Fred Hetchinger, as Jason. This is a guy who quite literally is in the shadow of everybody else at this camp. He's just so dorky. He's just like, his story's not even that complicated. Like, there's no deep reason for why he loves this camp. He just loves it. Like, there isn't some moment where he's sitting with Claire and they're bloody and waiting for the killer, and he's just like, you know, my parents were never around, so blah, 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 and that's why I love camp. Gen Zers, they're like, no, dude, he just really loves camp. He's one of those weirdos who just really loves camp. There's nothing weird about it at all. That's just his thing. That's his fetish. I love that about this movie, that he is truly pure of heart. That's another thing. Sometimes you can make, and it's been so popular for about the last 30 years, to make anti-heroes, to make heroes that are edgier or have a problem or have a backstory that's dark. Superman is not edgy. Superman does not have a backstory. Superman is a Boy Scout. Captain America is a Boy Scout. Jason is a Boy Scout. Jason is just a guy who loves working with kids at a camp. He's excited to do it. He's excited to spend the next 2.5 months in a summer camp, swatting mosquitoes, singing songs by the campfire, and making s'mores. That's who he is. And he just has to rise to this occasion of, like, you know, and by the way, what I love about the way they write this character is he has to be saved by Claire in the end. He's not that great at any of this stuff. He ends up being captured by, I think it was by Demi, tied up. She's ready to slash him, and Claire has to come save the day. He helps her because he's better at shooting an arrow and she's not. And so he uses code language to help her shoot the arrow properly, and she does. And that's how they save the day. They work together. Way more interesting, way more nuanced, less typical. It would have been way more typical if, or stereotypical, if she just found the strength to hit the arrow, tried and true. No, he had to help her. He had to kind of coach her. It was smart, Damon. And the character was written smart, and his character was performed smart.
right in the beginning of the movie when you meet Jason, he's being driven to camp by his mother. He's 24 years old, by the way. And at one point he's like, "Oh man, I'm having a second thought." And in his head, he's like, "I'm having a second thought." Like I can't remember. I only saw the movie once, but maybe it's like I forgot to bring marshmallows or just something like camp related. And his mom is like, "Oh, do you want me to turn around and take you home?" Because she just wants her kid to grow up and actually be an adult. He's 24 and he's still this excited about making $100 a week as a camp counselor, and she's just like, "Oh God, this is the worst. Like, this is the worst nightmare of apparently." Next to him being arrested in jail right now, him still being an adolescent at 24, camp counseling in every summer, and it's just so depressing. It's one of the funniest things. But I also love the casting here, and when I say this, it might sound mean-spirited. I don't mean it to be mean-spirited. We've had this conversation before when you cast the wrong character in the wrong part. I always think of a movie that is just so like mind-numbingly stupid. Like I think it's called She's All That, where they take the girl, the mousy girl, and they put a pair of glasses on her, and suddenly she's not attractive. And they take
frizzy
the glasses
hair,
off.
glasses.
Yeah. I'm just like, come on, like Sydney Sweeney is not dressed up particularly well in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I understand that, but she still looks like Sydney Sweeney. Like, don't sell me that Sydney Sweeney, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you can't be multifaceted as an actor and Margot Robbie can't play many roles. I'm just saying don't ignore it. One of my favorite parts of the Barbie movie, I don't know how I brought this up, but Barbie is when they're doing a really emotional scene and Margot Robbie breaks down. There's literally a voiceover in the movie that says, "We know making Margot Robbie ugly cry is the worst possible thing we could do because it doesn't work." They literally acknowledge that like she's just too gorgeous to sell this as, but they actually acknowledge it's freaking hilarious. It's like my favorite part of that movie. They literally stop the movie with a voiceover and say, "We know this doesn't really work because Margot Robbie is far too attractive, but we're going to do it anyways." I fucking love that. And Fred Hettinger, who I knew from The White Lotus, which he actually played Sydney Sweeney's brother in the first season, and he was also from Fear Street. He was in all three Fear Street movies. Mm-hmm. He's perfectly fitted to play Jason, the dorky 24-year-old camp counselor. Like, he fits so perfectly in this role. And I'm not saying he's not a good-looking dude. I'm just saying, like, you don't cast David Corenswet, who's playing Superman in the new movie. You're not casting him to play Jason in this movie. Fred Hettinger works.
He really does. He knew how to like make himself more diminutive and goofy and all that. Like it's all in his performance. Like the guy's a great actor. He was in not a great movie, Gladiator 2, and he plays kind of a totally different character, kind of a blowhard prince or whatever, like a co-Caesar or whatever he's playing in that movie. So he's got range certainly, but he knew the buttons to turn to make this kind of sort of pathetic guy. Like at the end of the day, he never isn't what he's never not what he is. Like he is who you thought he was, I guess is my point. He was a dorky guy who couldn't save the day, and that's how he ends the movie the same way. He just helps, you know, he's a helper. He's a camp counselor who can teach you how to shoot your arrow better, and that is literally how the movie is saved. He teaches Claire how to shoot the arrow better. That saves the day. That's how they save the day in this movie.
Yeah, it's perfect. Let's talk about MVP. We mentioned it earlier, of course. There's a lot of different ways you can go at MVP. Our Ken Foree Banana Hammock MVP Award, named after great character actor Ken Foree from the movie From Beyond, when he jumps down a flight of stairs into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, I know you said you switched yours up, so I'm curious, what is your new MVP for Hell of a Summer?
My original MVP was Ezra, who's like the theater coach, and he's just a dramatic theater kid, and he was very funny. That character was incredibly funny and carried a lot of the movie, so I was going to choose him. I decided, after your discussion about every piece fitting, to go with Bobby. Bobby is Chris's friend, and basically he's just the one guy at camp that nobody wants to hook up with. He's not even a bad-looking guy. He's just like I'm literally the fifth wheel here. Nobody gives a fuck about me. Even dorky Jason has Claire to hang out with. And when I talk to her, she doesn't want to hang out with me. The vegan girl that's annoying everybody won't date me because I fucked up and said I was a Scorpio. So she walked away because she hates Scorpios. He's just shit out of luck. And I was like, I'm not like loving this storyline. I don't get where it's going. Ultimately, in the end, he comes face to face with the alpha male guy at the camp, which is Mike, the other killer. He's face to face with the guy he wants to be, the guy he calls classically handsome, the guy he calls like, he basically is like, man, I wish I was Mike, basically. Now he has to face down Mike. Not only does he have to face down Mike, and he wins by getting the shit, basically just being strong enough to keep getting the shit kicked out of him until he finally gets the upper hand and knifes Mike. But that wasn't the final piece of the puzzle. Why this whole drawn out Bobby storyline that I was like, this better fucking go somewhere. He finds the strength to kind of be the guy finally. Like that was his storyline. But he's just not the A storyline. Typically that's the A storyline. He's like the B or C storyline. And he finds the strength to be the guy and take on the best guy in camp and win. But I was like, oh, there's a complication here. If they don't save Bobby, there is no legitimate witness to who the killers were. He originally thought it was Jason, and he went with everybody else and was like, yeah, it's totally Jason, like the weirdo who loves camp. It's got to be him, the killer. Then he actually has to come face to face with the killers and fight one of them so he can tell the police, here was the guy that was trying to kill me. Here's all the evidence. I stabbed him with this knife. He stabbed me with the knife. You can check his fingerprints, blah, 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 blah. When they get into that fight, they start to burn down the cabin. Well, that creates a new complication. Jason and Claire have to save him because if they don't, or I think it ended up being, what's her name? What's her name saved him? Why can't I think? Oh, Shannon. Yeah, I think, Shannon. Thank you. Shannon ends up saving him. But it was important that a witness be saved because in that knife fight, he's bleeding out. Not a terrible flesh. It's just a flesh wound. But he's also in a burning cabin. If you don't save him, you don't have the story straight, and Jason could still go to jail for being the killer. So he was the MVP. He was kind of the key to making sure everything fit. When you brought that up earlier, I realized I was like, every piece of the movie mattered. That always impresses me. When I go, oh, nobody here was just fodder. Nobody here was just a body. That's so many camp movies, plenty of Jason movies are guilty of it, where they're just there to be killed. Everyone in this movie has a target on their back, but they all serve a purpose. And so I gave my MVP to Bobby because he serves a very important purpose to just this other element of the story that if you pull at the threads and things fall apart without that. So you needed it. And that's why he's my MVP.
Bobby desperately wants a purpose. That's what makes him such a great character because this movie works with Jason, Fred Hettinger's character at the top, and then everybody else is number 2 on the call sheet. There's no other like co-star. Yes, Finn Wolfhard is the most recognizable, but I would say his character Chris isn't even like totally like he's there, but he's not any more important than anybody else there. And right. Bobby is very much in that, like, again, it's so Bobby throughout the entire movie is trying desperately to find a purpose. At one point, he's going to jump his BMX over the campfire because he wants to impress everybody that he could do this. And at one point, he's trying to hype himself up. And the one kid, I think it was an Ari.
It was Ari.
Yeah. He's the kid with the nut allergy, which, of course, that's just another character that fits perfectly in this world. He just blurts out, pussy. And Bobby's like, I'm done. I can't believe you would insult me that way. I'm done. I'm not doing this. And everyone's like, oh, and they'll just kind of walk away disappointed because he's trying so hard to get noticed and do something. And even in the end, you mentioned he gets into this knife fight with Mike, and he eventually takes a little pocket knife and stabs into Mike's neck to kill him. Shannon and they come out and rescue him, and then Claire and Jason find him, and he's sitting there holding onto his gut because he got stabbed, and it's like he's bleeding out, and he's just like, I gave my life for you guys. And Jason very astutely noticed, he's like, yeah, your stab wound's like 2 inches deep, dude. You're going to be fine. It's so perfect because even in that moment, when yes, you're right, he is truly the MVP who saves the day. Even then, he still wants to be the martyr. He wants to be the guy who sacrificed. He's not really going to die. He's like, oh man, I'm stabbed, I'm bleeding out. Oh, and they're like holding the pressure down. And then Jason's just like, yeah, you're not really in danger, dude. Like you're fine. But
yeah,
even
you're gonna get sewed up
like,
in the ambulance. You're good.
He so desperately wanted to save the day, and you're absolutely right. That character totally pays off for him. He just so badly wanted to be needed or wanted. Him trying to hook up with the vegan girl was so hilarious. He's just like, I meet his murderer and it's evil, and she's just like so into him, and he's like, I finally found one, and she's like, you're a Scorpio, fuck off. He's like, God damn. He just can't get that attention. It's great. Listen, I would love to sit here and say I went more in depth with my MVP, but I think we all know where I'm going to go here. It's Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick, and I'm going to go give you a slightly different reason why I'm giving them my MVP. Now, a lot of actors in Hollywood want to be creatives. They work on scripts, they eventually become directors and things like that, and it does work out for a lot of them. And you can think of a million examples of, especially on TV, where people are TV stars and they graduate and become directors. And you can look at, while Seth Rogen is now starring in a new Apple TV show, he has almost transitioned wholly out of acting. He's now more producing and writing and doing things like that. And again, he was doing that very early on as well. But Seth Rogen's another example of this. And I bring this up because I just recently listened to the Rewatchables podcast where they were talking about Good Will Hunting, and they were talking about Matt Damon and Ben Affleck writing that incredible script at 23 years old, getting it made. It gets nominated for 1 million Oscars. They win the Oscar for Best Screenplay. Robin Williams wins for Best Supporting Actor. Huge film. And everyone's like, why didn't they do more of that? Like, they kind of just went off and did their own thing. Now, of course, if you're, knowledgeable about the film business, you know that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have gotten back together. They've written movies together. They are still very much lifelong friends. But they brought up a point in that podcast. I was like, yeah, I never really thought about that. They're like, why didn't Ben and Matt do more of that? And they're like, well, because they started getting paid $20 million to be actors. Yeah. They're not worried about writing scripts anymore because you're not going to pay scale. You're not going to get Writers Guild of America scale for your script versus getting paid $20 million to do the Bourne Supremacy and doing fucking Armageddon. And they're like, that's why they stopped writing, is because they started getting paid to be actors. And so my point about this with Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick, now I know Billy Brick is not a household name. I'm not going to pretend he is. He is definitely the guy you don't know, but he was in Ghostbusters and him and Finn became buddies. Finn Wolfhard is the name here. He's the Stranger Things star. But the fact that he's like, I want to write a script, I want to produce it, and I want to direct it. And they did all of that. And yes, they are in the movie, and I would argue that Billy Brick has a more, as you mentioned, more impactful role as an actor in this movie than Finn Wolfhard does. He's just the most recognizable. But I love that they want to take on that responsibility. And if you look at the marketing campaign for this movie, which is Neon, another fucking studio that's absolutely killing it, they've been all over the place. They've been doing live appearances. They've been doing secret screenings and Q&As. This is a passion project for them. And I love that they're putting that kind of attention to detail into this, that they love it so much. Now, is Finn Wolfhard going to suddenly just stop acting and just become a writer? Probably not. But I love that they took that chance and they wanted to be in here. And Finn Wolfhard recognized, hey, I'm Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things. More people are going to come see this movie if my name is on the marquee. And he's right. As you said, people in your theater were literally like, we just wanted to see Finn Wolfhard. We have no idea what the movie was about. It worked. I love it. I love that they are taking that step to say we want to be on the creative process and do this, because they could. Finn Wolfhard, I don't know about Billy Brick, but Finn Wolfhard could have easily been like, dude, I'm living off this sweet Ghostbusters money. I'm living off this sweet Stranger Things money. I'm going to go star in whatever fucking movie is going to pay me another $20 million to be the lead or whatever in my next year. I'm going to be in a Marvel movie. No. He wanted to do Hell of a Summer, which is a very small budget independent film, and I love that. You brought up Sydney Sweeney, you brought up Margot Robbie. These two people have something in common with Finn Wolfhard, is they're making their own stuff. They're actually championing in the case of Finn Wolfhard, he's co-writing a script with Billy Brick, but the point is that they're out there making their own things.
Sydney Sweeney made Immaculate so she could be in a vehicle that wasn't just I'm the pretty girl, I'm the romantic interest in a movie or something. I want to do something interesting with my career. Margot Robbie, same deal. You know, she wanted to do I, Tanya, which is not the most flattering movie for someone like her that is cast and literally only getting roles like Barbie type roles. She was like, I want to invest in myself. So that's what Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick are doing. They're going, we want to invest in ourselves and show what we can do. I'm very impressed with this script. Very, very impressed with this script. And what that tells me is that these guys are smart storytellers. Smart storytellers, they don't always have to be the director. They don't always have to star in the movie. They might for a long time because I think, as you said, Finn's a bit of a draw. You know what I mean? He's not as big as Millie Bobby Brown or anything, but he's a draw. He's still somebody who's like in movies. He's always fourth or third down the line in a movie, but he's in movies. He's successful in this business. So for a while, they're going to be guys who are in front of the camera, but for a longer while, they have the potential to develop and make interesting stuff because this script is airtight. And so that allows them to go, hey, I see some new talent over here. They have an interesting script. We can help them develop that script into something really good for the screen. I'm trusting these guys now. Based on this first outing, I go, man, this is a fucking airtight idea, airtight execution. It's different. And you may come out of this movie going, what were they all on about? It's kind of the stuff that lies under the surface. It's not necessarily what's out front. I'm impressed what's going on with what's going on under the surface and how they are kind of crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's. There's not a lot of fat on this movie. There's no loose threads. That's something that isn't typical for 20 somethings to do, for young 20 somethings to do when it comes to filmmaking. So I'm super impressed with them and I want to see what they do next.
And you mentioned Margot Robbie. I want to throw this out there real quick. She has her production company is called Lucky Chap. Watch movies now and see when you see that logo on there, that's Margot Robbie's company. I mentioned the movie with Samara Weaving that came out called Borderline. That was produced by Lucky Chap, which is Margot Robbie's company. You'll see her stamp on a lot of stuff. She produces a lot of stuff, and that's Margot Robbie. I mean, again, yes, it's her company, and she has other people helping to make decisions and produce things, but watch for that logo, Lucky Chap. It has become a very popular logo on films right now, and that's Margot Robbie's company. Now, because if you saw in this movie, I saw one of the main producers was Jason Bateman. I don't know if you caught that at the end.
I did.
I love that. I'm a big Jason Bateman fan, and I love that. I don't know what role he played. I don't know if he's just like financial or he just put his name on it, say, hey, put my name on it, I'll help you, get it out there, whatever. And again, Neon is a indie studio, but it's a good indie studio. It's a very successful indie studio, much like A24. But I was like, oh, Jason Bateman. Now, I don't even know what the connection is. I don't remember that Finn Wolfhard's been in anything with Jason Bateman, at least now off the top of my head. But I love that that's there. And so just like Lucky Chap, when you watch movies like Borderline or any other movie out there, when you see that Lucky Chap, remember, this is Margot Robbie putting her stamp on a movie, just like with this one with Jason Bateman. Like, I have no idea what Jason Bateman's involvement was, but he saw something in this movie to say, I want to be a producer. And he was one of the main producers. He wasn't like down the line on the credits. Like, one of the first credits is produced by so-and-so and Jason Bateman. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So, champion creators, and I think these two guys, again, I don't think they're gonna, especially Finn Wolfhard, I don't think he's gonna start giving up $20 million paychecks to just write, but the fact that he took this chance at 22 to make this movie says a lot about who he is.
Absolutely.
Next category, Patrick, let's talk about Best Kill. This is still a slasher. This is still a horror film. We talked so much about character development and funny stuff. We haven't talked a lot about the horror. There is horror. It's not as deep as some of the other parts of this movie, but there is horror. So, Patrick, what is your best kill in Hell of a Summer?
I think some of our listeners might go to see this movie and then afterwards go like, what the fuck? This wasn't like a slasher like the way I'm used to. Everybody's now like, if it isn't Terrifier level, like, is it even a slasher anymore? It's like, listen, that's the extreme. That's the far end of things. And I would argue that this is not even as extreme as like a Friday the 13th for the most part. So there wasn't like a ton of crazy kills in this movie. I would have liked to have seen more of that. And why they didn't do that, I'm curious. But there was one kill that I absolutely loved, and that was Ezra's kill. Ezra's on the stage trying to be dramatic, trying to distract everybody with thoughts on maybe he'll do a play while everybody's like, hunkered down, trying to hide from the killer. The killer comes from behind the stage. Literally, they break his leg on stage, which is they're breaking a leg, right? That's like a stage terminology. And then they take a fucking, I think it was an axe or something, right to his dome. Hardcore, on the level of a Friday the 13th movie. And you see the blood spraying, you see the gore in the head and all that stuff. And I was like, well, there it is. There's the big bad kill I was looking for.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of that, and there were a lot of cutaways. And again, early on, I got it once they revealed the killers, because if you would have just shown everyone getting killed, it wouldn't have made sense in a lot of ways for Demi and Mike to be revealed as the killers. The whole idea is the off-screen kills pay off when you find out who the actual killers are. So I kind of understood it. And then, of course, you have the one kill where the girl gets beheaded and they literally show her decapitated head in the refrigerator, which is pretty cool. But my favorite kill actually came towards the end, and that was when Claire shot Demi with the... Is it Demi or Demi? I always say...
I think it's Demi, yeah.
Demi Moore. Yeah, it's like the part in Seinfeld, but like, is it Demi? He's like, I don't know what a semi tractor trailer is. I guess it is Demi. When Claire shoots Demi with the arrow through the eye, and just the great interaction between Claire and Jason when he's coaching her through, just like when he taught her how to shoot an arrow. And again, we always say, if you're going to show us something, use it. Early on in the movie, when all the camp counselors are getting there, they're starting to get the archery stuff, and Claire pretty clearly can't shoot a bow. And in steps Jason, this dorky fucking dude who's been here for 8 years. Immediately, he's nailing bullseyes. He's done this a million times. He's won second place at the Pineway Camp whatever Olympics like 4 years in a row. He's very astute at this job. And he coaches her through, and he's like, just remember, you're not pulling on the bow, you're pushing out. Remember, push out and then let go. And then when she does it, she shoots the arrow straight. That's very early on in the movie. Then at the end, when Demi has Jason tied up to a chair about to slash his throat, she comes in with the bow and arrow, and he doesn't just tell her. He's like, don't worry about it. Let me go. Just push through. You can do it, Claire. You can push through. He's kind of giving her a motivational speech. And Demi's like, what the fuck is going on here? He's like trying to coach her in life before I kill him. And then he keeps saying, push through. And that's the coaching advice he gave her earlier. When she lets go of the arrow, it flings into Demi's eyes, and she gets killed by the arrow. So I love that little bit of show us something and actually pay it off.
And they subverted our expectations because we just assumed that Jason was going to be the one that would use that arrow. If you're astute enough, you go, well, that's what's going to happen later. He's going to use that arrow somehow to save the day. His coaching saves the day, and Claire finds the skill to make the kill. And then also there's a bit of subversion in Demi's kill, because she hits her dead in the eye, like bullseye, quite literally, and she falls to the floor, and they go up to inspect her, and what does any good killer do? They lunge one last time, and Claire just stomps the shit out of her. And I was like, I really like that. Like they didn't try to make it like all the typical ones before. They're like, oh, you still alive? Cool, let me just stomp your brains out.
Yeah, it was cool. She was literally just like, oh, no, you're not getting up. Stay down. Next category, Patrick, can we survive this horror film? Now, this is a Patrick Guerra specialty because it is a camp slasher, but this is a much different camp slasher. Now, I know it's hard for us to inject ourselves into these 20-somethings when we are clearly not 20-something anymore, and I'm sure in the back of your head, like, I'd probably be high and fucking during this movie because that's what they did in Friday the 13th. But Patrick, can you survive Hell of a Summer?
I don't think so. What I'm thinking of is 18, 19-year-old Patrick, and he was Mr. Horny, like, for sure. So you're at camp to get laid, right? Like I think we've kind of been down this road when we've talked about Friday the 13th before. It's the same problem here, that I'm going to be distracted and the killers are going to get the jump on me. I'd love to think that I would be able to do something else, but no. I think I'm getting slashed.
So I'm actually going to go on the opposite and say, based on this movie, I feel like I would probably be Bobby, where I'm always going to be the fifth wheel. I feel like that was me a lot of my youth growing up. And so I feel like I would survive based solely on the fact that I'm just trying to find my place in the world, and I have to finally tackle Mike at the end of the movie and stab him in the neck with a with a pocket knife that's been framed and fallen to the ground. And then afterwards, I'm like, I'm the hero. And they're like, yeah, you got stabbed like 2 inches, dude. You're cool. I feel like I would be Bobby. And so in that regard, like that was the character I related to the most. I was like, God, I understand that so much when you're always constantly the third wheel or the fifth wheel, depending on how you want to look at it. So yeah, I think, unless I actually tried to jump my BMX over a fire, which I would never do, I think I would be Bobby, and I think I'd probably make it. I might get a couple stab wounds along the way, but I think I'd make it out.
I might agree with that.
Patrick, next category, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. This is pretty self-explanatory, but just for new folks here, this is where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they leave it alone? So when it comes to Hell of a Summer, Patrick, remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
Damon, a lot of people survived this movie. Chris and oh God, I forget her name again. Shannon, Chris, Shannon, Claire, and Bobby, and Jason, they all survived. So there's plenty of them to go around. So I say sequel, but I'm saying it in a different way, Damon. I really like what Wolfhard and Brick did with this. So they took on the camp slasher. Now I'd like to see them take on the 2000s slasher. So I'd like to see a sequel that is basically an I know what happened last summer. So now I would like to see them take the tropes of a post-Scream slasher world and play with that. Play with the idea that like someone wants to get famous being a killer, so why don't we kill the people who survived that camp massacre? That works. And I trust these guys to make a clever script. So that's the sequel I would like to see.
1,000% it's sequel, and 1,000% your idea is correct. And I'll add to that by saying that there's a great moment at the end of the movie where Jason and Claire finally get together and they kiss. But right before that, Jason goes, man, we're going to have to really clean things up and do some PR and figure things out because, man, next summer it's going to be rough, but we'll be back. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? You still want to come back and do this again? And he finally's like, no, I'm joking. Like, it's a great moment where you're just like, Jesus, dude, like even now you want to come back and be a camp counselor? And he finally grows up and he's like, no, I'm joking. I don't want to come back here. But that plays perfectly into your sequel, which is he doesn't come back to Camp Pineway. And now he actually, I think during the early parts of the movie, he mentions very loosely and very second-handedly, he's almost like a lawyer. I think he actually was going to law school because I think his mom kind of mentions that, and he kind of mentions it in passing where I think he actually went to law school but just wants to be a camp counselor. Maybe we go into that trip where now he actually is a lawyer of some kind. Of course, he's not going to be the big corporate lawyer and successful. He's going to be a public defender.
Oh, yeah, definitely public defender.
But like that is your new trope. So you are 1,000% right, but I just love they added that little sprinkle at the end of him still clinging on to it, but not really. So now maybe he is the lawyer, or maybe he is some other job, and yes, you play back into the tropes and do a whole new Hell of a Summer. It's just not at a summer camp.
Yeah, I think these guys have a very promising future in horror.
100%. Patrick, last category as always, is it scary? So when it comes to Hell of a Summer, is it scary?
Now, I really should have changed this to is it slashy, right? And because we're talking about a slasher tonight, and the truth is it is very slashy. It's just updated. It's Gen Z. If you're ready for it. I know we got some older folks that listen to us, and I know we got some younger folks that listen to us. If you're on the older side, you might find this movie to be very different than what you're used to. That's okay. Embrace that. The truth is, they still made a slasher. It still qualifies as a slasher. They do it differently. They do, in my opinion, they do it more sophisticated, not elevated, sophisticated. There's a difference, right? Like they don't just dumb everything down so that you'll enjoy it. They make it interesting. They make it matter. And to me, that makes for a fuller experience. But at the end of the day, it was still a slasher. They just did it their way.
And I would say if you change the category, is it slashy? 1,000%. And also I'll add that while a lot of slashers, as much as I love slashers and it is my favorite genre, a lot of them don't really truly scare me. What I love about slashers is I love the Mask Killer. I love this ensemble of characters, much like Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick talked about when they made this. So, like, I love horror. I love teen ensemble comedies. Let's combine them and make a horror film. And that's what they did. And I guess I'm kind of in that same bucket. I like that same kind of movie. So when I watch a lot of the Friday the 13th or even Halloween or even my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm not sitting there terrified out of my mind. I just love the story, the lines, the dialogue, the characters. It all just makes me love it. And so I think Hell of a Summer works in that way. So are you going to be scared out of your mind? Absolutely not. Although apparently the kids in your theater were scared out of their minds when they didn't know what they were stepping into. So yeah, again, is it scary? No. Is it slashy? 1,000% yes.
Hell yes.
All right, Patrick, that is our episode. As we said, go check out Hell of a Summer. It is available in theaters right now. As always, we appreciate everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there. And again, if you don't even watch us on YouTube, you just want to help us out, just please like and subscribe our page. It really does help us with search results and algorithm and all that good stuff. Now that we are living in the Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Muskiverse, we need help with that, so please help us out. You can also find us over on our website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. We put up all of our podcasts as well as interviews, articles, and reviews that we can't do on the podcast. So check out the full website for rewindofthelivingdead.com. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up anytime on social media. You can find us on Twitter /X, Facebook, or Instagram. Once again, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You can find us over there, or you can send us an email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Or you can find us on our own personal social media channels. I am Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And as always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.